Hey guys, this is Austin, and today I'm here with a PC build for $350. So this is a great entry-level system for those of you guys who are new to PC gaming. Maybe you're coming from a console or something, but this is a very good starting point. On top of that, this is also a very upgradable PC. So as is, it's a very solid computer, but if you would like to upgrade with SSDs, graphics cards, hard drives, all that kind of stuff, it makes it very simple and pretty cheap to do it as well. To kick the build off, we're going to be using an AMD A10 5800K APU. Now, APU is what AMD calls this. Basically, it is a CPU as well as a GPU built into one thing. So basically, the way you can think of it is, instead of having to spend an extra $100, $200 on a graphics card, you're getting what's basically a $50 graphics card built in for free. This is a quad-core processor clocked at 3.8 GHz. However, thanks to the fact that it's unlocked, you can very easily overclock it. So all you need to do is go into the BIOS and select the OC Genie button. This will automatically overclock it to 4.2 GHz, which is a very nice gain. The 5800K also has some pretty decent graphics built in. So even demanding games like Battlefield 3 as well as Far Cry 3 are both totally playable at 720p, and Skyrim is actually playable at 1080p as long as you turn the settings down to low. Now, while this might sound super impressive if you have a really powerful gaming PC, if you're coming from a console, this is going to be a good step up. And on top of that, pretty much any other game that's going to be older than Battlefield 3 or Far Cry 3 is, again, both of these games are some of the best looking games and some of the most demanding and intensive games out there. So for example, Team Fortress 2, Portal 2, that kind of thing, are going to run with absolutely no problems with very nice high settings. So considering that you get all of this for about $125, the A10 5800K is going to be a great choice for our build. For a motherboard, we're going to be using an MSI FM2 A75 MAE35. So while I pretend that I didn't actually ruin that take like 50 times in a row trying to remember that long name, this is actually a very good board if you can, remember the name of the board, which I apparently can't. So one of the cool things about this is that you get a lot of features that you usually do not get with budget builds. So for example, you get USB 3.0 support, which is very nice, but even more important than that, at least for me, is the fact that you have 6 SATA 3 ports. Like I said earlier, thanks to that A75 chipset, you have full access to overclocking your CPU as well as your GPU, and on top of that, if you ever want to, you can very easily add a graphics card to the system, which will allow you to upgrade it even farther. So between an SSD and adding something like a Radeon 7750 or 7850 or something like that, you can very easily increase the performance of the system for not a whole lot of extra money. So overall, this motherboard is a great deal for the system for about $60. For memory, we're going to be using 8 GB of Samsung DDR3 RAM. Now, I'm a big fan of this stuff. I use it in most of my builds as it's a very good performer, a good overclocker, and it's also a little bit smaller than most memory, which allows you to fit some heat sinks that you otherwise might not be able to fit onto your motherboard. RAM is especially important for an APU-based system like this, so this is not an area where you want to skimp out, and in fact, if you would like, you can actually overclock this memory some to get some better performance. Now, one thing I will mention is that this actually memory has been fluctuating in price a lot lately, so what I will do is add an additional link to another different kind of memory in the description. So if it's more expensive, like for example, this memory right now is closer to $60, where it's usually around $35 to $45. So I will have 2 links in the description. Both are fantastic memory, and pretty much whichever one you can get for cheapest, I would recommend going for that. For a hard drive, we're going to be using a 500 GB Western Digital CAVIAR Blue. Now, I use these things all the time in my builds, as not only are they reliable, but they're also fairly speedy and give you plenty of space for a pretty reasonable price. So with 500 GB of capacity, you've got plenty of room for your games, pictures, music, media, all that kind of fun stuff. And on top of that, since it is a 7200 RPM drive, you're going to get some pretty decent speeds. Of course, I do recommend that when you do get the money, it's a good idea to go with an SSD. And again, I'll add a link to a good SSD in the description as well as pretty much everything else I talk about. But for the time being, for only $50, you really can't beat this. For a case, we're going to be using an NZXT Source 210. Now, this is a favorite of mine, as for a budget build like this, you really can't ask for a whole lot more. It's not really flimsy, so it's going to be fairly well built. It's not going to be all that difficult to work in, thanks to the fact that it's an ATX size case. And on top of that, you have plenty of room for lots of expansion in the future, all for about $40. For a power supply, we're going to be using a 430 watt CORSAIR CX430. Now, this is another one of those parts that I love to recommend in my budget builds, as it's going to give you some good reliability, good performance, and a good price, which is a good combo. So for starters, it's an 80+ bronze certified power supply, which means it's going to be very efficient and it's going to be a little bit higher quality than what a lot of the other kind of power supplies that you'll find at this price. And on top of that, with 430 watts of capacity, this is going to be more than enough for the build as is, and it can even handle a graphics card when you decide to upgrade in the future. So all of this for about $40 makes this a definite buy. For an operating system, you have the choice between Windows 7 and Windows 8. So I'm going to leave this one entirely up to you guys. Whichever one you want to use is totally fine. So Windows 7 is more the safe choice. It's been around for longer. However, Windows 8 is a little bit newer. Well, obviously it's newer, but it also does tend to run a little bit quicker, especially when you're booting. And on top of that, as long as you kind of ignore all the Metro stuff and just use it like typical Windows, it's actually very quick and very snappy. So this one, no matter which one you pick, is going to add about $100 to the system cost. So there you have it, an awesome $350 gaming PC. So since prices are constantly changing, I'll have links to everything I mentioned in the description of this video, as well as some additional upgrades. So for example, if you guys want to add an SSD to your build, or you want to add a DVD drive, or a more powerful graphics card, whatever you guys want to do, I'll have some additional links in the description, which should work just fine for this build. If you guys are interested in more, feel free to check out some of my other recent builds, including the $600 gaming PC. If you enjoyed this video, definitely be sure to leave it a thumbs up, and if you're interested in more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. Anyway guys, I will catch you next time.